was death, where there once was pain, He is making all things new. Where there once was fear, and where there once was shame, let a flood of joy break through. Let it overflow. In the valley that is dried up, let the living waters rise up, rise up. In the valley that is dried up, let the living waters rise up, rise up. Where there once was death, where there once was pain, He is making all things new. Where there once was fear, where there once was shame, let a flood of joy break through. Let it overflow. In the valley that is dried up, let the living waters rise up, rise up. In the valley that is dried up, let the living waters rise up, rise up, rise up, rise up, rise up. Let it rise up, rise up, let it rise. Let my life be found where abundance flows. Let my joy abound in my passion grow. Pour your spirit out, Lord. Let it overflow. Let it overflow. Let it overflow. Let it overflow. Let the living waters rise up, rise up, rise up. In the valley that is dried up, let the living waters rise up, rise up.
They stripped him, and twisting together a crown of thorns, they put it on his head and put a reed in his right hand. And kneeling before him, they mocked him, saying, "Hail, King of the Jews!" and led him away to crucify him. And when they came to a place called Golgotha, they put the charge against him, which read, "This is Jesus, the King of the Jews." From the 6th hour, there was darkness over all the land. Jesus cried out, my God, why have you forsaken me?" About the 9th hour, Jesus cried out again with a loud voice and yielded up his spirit. And behold, the curtain of the temple was torn in two from top to bottom, and the earth shook, and the rocks were split. His body was placed in a tomb cut out of the rock. At dawn on Sunday, the women went to see the tomb. An angel of the Lord had descended from heaven and rolled back the stone. The angel said to the women, "Do not be afraid, for I know that you seek Jesus who was crucified. He is not here, for he has risen."
Friday's disappointment, the Sunday's empty tomb. Since when has impossible ever stopped you? This is the sound of dry bones rattling. This is the praise make a dead man walk again. Open the grave, I'm coming out, I'm gonna
Well, welcome to Rainier View. We are so excited to celebrate Easter together. My name is Jeff. I'm part of our teaching team here. And just to kind of get you up to speed, as we've been leading up to Easter this year, we've been in a series called Movement. And really the point of the series has been looking at the reality that God can meet us in any place that we're at. For some of us, we're in a place of spiritual apathy. We really aren't that concerned about issues and matters of faith or the spiritual life. For some of us, we're in a space of curiosity. We're open to ideas, we want to explore, but we're not quite sure what we believe or where we're at with that. Some of us have come to a place of belief, we've embraced faith, but maybe that's about it. It's not something that's actively shaping and changing our lives. For others of us, we're in a place of maturing in our faith, we're seeking to grow in our faith and live that out in daily and weekly ways. And then for some of us, we're in a place where we are truly trying to leave a legacy like Jesus invites us to give the entirety of our lives away by serving others. The great thing is that wherever you are at, there is something for you. When we come to God's Word, there's something for each and every one of us, no matter where we are in our own journey with faith. And so we believe here that every Sunday we are not living out just merely religious ritual, but we are living out a movement that Jesus began over 2,000 years ago. But it does beg the question, why this movement? Like, what makes following Jesus unique? Why should we consider and embrace this faith? Because there are a lot of different ideas out there, and just let me give you a few of the more offbeat ones. So from the Aetherius Society, their webpage says this, if you want to check this out. It says, King Yoga, the spiritual path of the Aetherius Society, changed the world and opened the door of enlightenment. If you're a genuine seeker searching for truth, you can change the world and open the door of enlightenment through King Yoga. King Yoga is the name we have given to the spiritual path of the Aetherius Society. The Aetherius Society was started in 1955 by the master of yoga, Dr. George King, to spread and act upon unique cosmic teachings given to Earth by highly evolved alien intelligences that we refer to as cosmic masters. Our purpose is to help as many people as possible prepare themselves for the coming new age. We do this mainly by radiating spiritual energy to improve world karma and raise global consciousness, often in direct cooperation with the cosmic masters. And here you can see a picture of George King charging up a spiritual battery. Maybe consider this option, the Honohana Sanpogyo group. It's a modern Japanese foot reading cult. And their leader claimed to be the reincarnation not only of Jesus Christ, but also of Buddha. And he claimed to be able to, if he looked at your feet, that you wouldn't die. And he would read different characteristics, like if you had a short toe, that indicates short temper. If you had a fat toe, indicates good health, good favor. And the whole thing kind of fell apart when his followers began to push back on the $900 per foot reading session that he was charging. And let's all be glad that your parents did not raise you in the tradition of the Freedomites. The Freedomites, who are they, you might say? This is a kind of wacky group that was started in 1902 in Saskatchewan, Canada, by different groups of people coming together, but they kind of rallied around three things: communal living, nudity, and pretty much anarchy. They actually bombed some Canadian government buildings in the 20s and 30s, nude of course, and for all of our sakes, we are not showing slides of this group to give you any mental images. Now, we might scratch our heads at some of these, we might even chuckle. Why would somebody willingly embrace one of these groups? But the reality is that all explanations for life at least are a little bit crazy. Even if you're somebody who says, no, I'm going to be a rationalist thinker, I'm going to be just a purely materialist in the sense of the material stuff of the world and rationalism, and that's how I'm going to embrace things, then that proposition says that basically we're just created out of star stuff billions of years ago that just unexpectedly popped out of nowhere. Okay? All explanations for life and these big questions are at least a little bit crazy when we really poke and prod them. What I want to ask all of us is, have we truly considered how the biblical story answers the big questions of life? Have we truly taken the time to explore and understand how the Bible and the biblical story of who God is and how He's interacted with us, how that answers the big questions of life? And so if you need a Bible, you can download a free digital version through the YouVersion Bible app, and you can get a copy there. But whether you've got a physical one or a digital one, we encourage you to open up to the Gospel of John this morning. And John opens his gospel with this picture of who Jesus is, and in this beautiful kind of imagery of how Jesus fits into this big story that God is telling. The Gospels, if you're unfamiliar, a gospel is an account of the life and teaching of Jesus. And in our Bibles, we have 4 of them: Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. And John is the most artsy, the most different of the 4. It's actually this kind of thematic, retrospective. It's not chronological. It's got this beautiful, vivid imagery and metaphor, and it's telling this big, grand story in his gospel. And so let's begin by looking at the very beginning of John's gospel in chapter 1. We read there, "In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. He was with God in the beginning. Through Him all things were made. Without Him nothing was made that has been made. In Him was life, and that life was the light of all mankind. The light shines in the darkness, but the darkness has not overcome it." Now, that term there that you see, the term "the Word," you might have questions about that, and we don't actually have time to dive into that today. But you can head over to the RVCC podcast. You can subscribe there. We've got an episode that dives deep into what that term would have meant for the original Jewish audiences hearing it in the 1st century AD, as well as those from the Greco-Roman background. But this word here, John is describing it as Jesus is the Word. And the Word really is the eternal God who acts in our history. And that God comes to us somehow in the person, in the work of Jesus, in this unique and powerful way. And Jesus comes to us not to take advantage of us, not to seek His own pleasure like the Greco-Roman conception of the gods, but Jesus comes to us for our advantage, to meet us truly where we are at for our benefit. And John describes this as Jesus coming to be the light of the world. He goes on to say in chapter 1 there, verse 9, "The true light that gives light to everyone was coming into the world. He was in the world, and though the world was made through Him, the world did not recognize Him. He came to that which was His own, but His own did not receive Him. Yet to all who did receive Him, to those who believed in His name, He gave the right to become children of God. Children born not of natural descent, nor of a human decision or a husband's will, but born of God. The Word became flesh and made His dwelling among us. And we have seen His glory, the glory of the one and only Son, who came from the Father, full of grace and truth." And so Jesus comes to inaugurate a new moment, a new kind of movement, one where Jesus, we read here, is described as being the light of the world. Not just a temporary light, not just a moment in time, but to establish for once and for all generations, throughout all time moving forward, that they could truly know who God is, that they could know the love of God in their lives somehow. But the question is, Jesus isn't walking around with us today, right? So if Jesus is this God with us moment, but He's not here, how do you and I get to know this light of the world? How do we know the love of God in our lives, but when Jesus isn't here? Well, Jesus tells us He actually entrusts this task, this responsibility to His followers, who we refer to today as the church. Jesus says so himself in Matthew 5, verse 14. You are the light of the world. A town built on a hill cannot be hidden. Neither do people light a lamp and put it under a bowl. Instead, they put it on a stand, and it gives light to everyone in the house. In the same way, let your light shine before others, that they may see your good deeds and glorify your Father in heaven. In the movement that Jesus invites us to, we're invited to be part of being the light of the world. But far too often, unfortunately, these misrepresentations of what being a follower of Jesus is all about kind of creep into the picture here. Unfortunately, sometimes these are true. People have a characterization of people in the church as mean, hypocritical, judgmental, not welcoming. And so sometimes, again, that is true. Sometimes I believe we hold to that misrepresentation because it's an easy excuse to push off matters of faith. We don't want to think about these big questions of life. We don't really want to wrestle with, what do I truly believe about who God is in my life and the role of faith and the answers to some of these bigger questions, and it's easier to not deal with it. But for some of us, we have encountered those who claim the tag Christian and yet act in a way that's mean, hypocritical, and judgmental. And for those of you who have experienced that, we want to apologize. We're sorry, because that is not how we want to conduct ourselves in our lives. We don't want to carry ourselves this way. And so this isn't our heart. We want to truly be people who are full of grace and truth, as it says there in John 1:14. And we want to emulate Jesus that way, to be a light in a dark world. But another reason that sometimes people have a difficult time connecting in church is because from the outside, it looks like everybody there has their stuff together. Like they don't have any real big issues, and we can feel unworthy. Like we can feel like we need to get our stuff together at some level before we can join. And that couldn't be further from the church. Let me tell you clearly, every single one of us who belong here at Rainier View or any church, we're just simply in our own journey, in our own process of grieving, healing, and moving towards the transforming power of grace that's been made available to us in Jesus. That's simply it. We're all trying to do that, but we're trying to do that together, because being the light of the world is not about being perfect. It's about being together. And so we want to invite you into that, because we desperately need to be in community with one another. Because again, we live in a world and a culture that is increasingly lonely and isolated. In 2021, an article was posted by the California Healthcare Foundation pointing to several studies seeing this increasing pandemic of loneliness in our culture. And we could think that, this is caused by the pandemic, but really, the pandemic just exacerbated a pre-existing condition. Consider this other study by the Kaiser Family Foundation in 2018. They discovered that 22% of adults, all adults in the US, that's about 60 million adults, to put that in perspective, reported that they often or always felt socially isolated or alone. Let that sink in. Because what we celebrate every year at Easter is that Jesus came to face the ultimate loneliness. As we saw earlier in the beginning of John's Gospel, John asserts that in the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. And so we believe as Christians, as followers of Jesus, that God enjoyed, before he spoke even one word into existence, God enjoys relationship within himself. That we believe that we say that God is Trinitarian, that God is one in essence, one united essence, unity, but within that there are three distinct personhoods: God the Father, God the Son, God the Holy Spirit. And so God enjoys perfect relationship within himself before he creates anything. Now, you don't have to understand all that. Okay, none of us fully understand all that. We just grasp with the words that we have to explain that. But what you can know, and what we do need to know about Jesus, is that he enjoyed unbroken relationship with the Father, with God forever. But when he comes to our level, when he chooses to come to earth, he somehow adds humanity to himself. His relationship with God is severely limited, restricted in some ways by adding humanity to his nature. And ultimately, at the cross, Jesus becomes separated from the Father. He becomes separated from God as he takes on the ultimate human condition, sin. Because what does sin do in our lives? It separates us from God. We all know that instinctively. We've all felt that and feel that we naturally are separated from God. And at the cross, Jesus, who is God himself, somehow experiences that. This is a mystery that we can't understand. But what the Gospels help us understand and realize is that because Jesus faced this ultimate moment of feeling alone, you and I never have to truly be alone again. Jesus experiences the ultimate loneliness at the cross, so you and I don't have to feel alone. Jesus doesn't just die on a Roman cross 2,000 years ago. The Gospels assert that 3 days later, Jesus experiences resurrection. And a few short months later, this movement begins to kick off, that those who are following Jesus begin to take this message of what happened into the world. And Peter, who is one of Jesus' closest followers, we read in Acts 2, he preaches pretty much the first sermon of the church, and he says this about the movement of God for all people, for all times. This is the message that he brings there. Acts 2, beginning verse 22. Fellow Israelites, listen to this. Jesus of Nazareth was a man accredited to you by God by miracles, wonders, and signs, which God did among you through him, as you yourselves know. This man was handed over to you by God's deliberate plan of foreknowledge, and you, with the help of wicked men, put him to death by nailing him to the cross. But God raised him from the dead, freeing him from the agony of death, because it was impossible for death to keep its hold on him. And so this message of what was accomplished through the person and the work of Jesus, the beautiful thing I love about the book of Acts in this moment is we see this community forming. What does the community of people who are following Jesus together look like? Read with me, jump down a few verses later, beginning in Acts 2, verse 41. Those who accepted his message were baptized, and about 3,000 were added to their number that day. They devoted themselves to the apostles' teaching and to the fellowship, to the breaking of bread and to prayer. Everyone was filled with awe at the many wonders and signs performed by the apostles. All the believers were together and had everything in common. They sold property and possessions to give to anyone who had need. Every day they continued to meet together in the temple courts. They broke bread in their homes and ate together with glad and sincere hearts, praising God and enjoying the favor of all the people. And the Lord added to their number daily those who were being saved. Really, these people who embrace this message of hope and faith in Jesus form this new beautiful community of people living out of grace and truth. And what we want you to know here at Rainier View, being part of our community is not, again, about being perfect. It's about being truly known, truly cared for, bringing all of ourselves to this community. And that's what being the light of the world is all about. That's where we experience transformation. And so you don't have to pose. You're invited to bring all of yourself, the good parts, the bad parts, the victories, the struggles, all of those things. We have this piece of artwork here that was created by one of our staff members, Sandy, and we share this because she shared this story with us, give us permission to share, of really her struggles over the past couple of years with her mental health. And so there was one moment where this was her response. This was her way of fighting against that and fighting that battle and worshiping and being reminded that truly we're the light of the world. And so these different elements in here represent struggles and shame interwoven with praise and prayer and hope all together. And so we share this with you because this is a picture of what we want each and every one of us to do, to show up with all the parts of our lives, not just the parts that we think we want people to see, but truly bringing all of ourselves to being the community that God calls us to be together. And so as a way of doing this, we've encouraged you, all the people of Rainier View, to turn in these slips of paper over the last several months. And so several months ago, we had you write on purple slips of paper, shame scripts, these soundtracks that play over and over again in our mind that you want to break free from, to break the cycle of shame. And we collected hundreds of these, of ways that you want to live differently and live out of the scripts that God has for you instead. We collected these orange and yellow slips of paper and just invited you to share your hopes and your prayers for future generations and for your children and your grandchildren, and to, again, bring those hopes in a tangible way. And then lastly, we encourage you to write on these white slips of paper names of people that you would love to have them join us here, or you would love for them to know the grace and the truth and the hope that's available in Jesus. And we collected all of these to remind us, again, that we are meant to live in the context of community. We're meant to bring the good things and the bad things, the struggles and the victories, and all of ourselves to be the community of God together. And so we know that many of us are seeking more meaningful relationships. We know for many of us, we desire and want to be known in a more real and a more profound way, to have true community around us. And so I'm inviting each and every one of us this Easter to consider being part of creating this kind of community that the world is desperate for. Would you consider joining us and really committing to community? Because here at Rainier View, we have over 20 smaller groups that meet through kind of different quarters of the year for like 8 to 10 week runs. And so there's always an opportunity coming up for you to engage in, you to step into some sort of community here. We create spaces for kids on Sunday mornings and for teenagers on Wednesday nights to experience community, that not just with peers, but adults that will help them process these foundational big questions of what are the values going to be that I'm going to carry forward in my life? How am I going to navigate the big answers to life's questions? And how does the story that God is telling help me make sense of my world and myself and give me a place of stability to live the rest of my life from? We invite you, no matter what age or stage of life you're in, to find community here, to truly invest, because that's what it means to be the light of the world together. We don't need to be perfect, but we do need to be together. And so you have a choice today to choose community, because we cannot, once again, be the light of the world without committing to being in community, to making a choice to do that. And so as we continue our celebration together this morning, I want to pause and just encourage us to think, what might I be missing out on by not choosing community? By not choosing to be part of this movement of seeing the kingdom of God expand, the kind of life that Jesus invites me to live out of grace, of hope, and truth that's available to me. Don't wait. Get in this community today.
Love came down in flesh, he walked among us, bore our sins. Through death he rose victorious, bursting from the grave he rose. Glorious we sing, light of the world, even death could not contain. Defeated on that day. Perfect light shining down upon us. We are free. In him we are victorious. Light of the world, even death could not contain. Darkness fell, was defeated on that day. He is alive, he is risen from the grave. All our sins are washed away. Light of the world. From the depths of darkness, brought us into glorious light. He broke the power